Welcome, everyone. I have 1201, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today. I hope everybody's having a good day, a good week. Other than the lack of rain, the weather has been absolutely beautiful, so that's good. We'll take that anytime we can get it in Kentucky. So today we are going to talk about the Community Lifeline Status System. Uh, the Wednesday webinars, you guys are all familiar with these. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if you ever have any suggestions on improvement, if you have any questions, if you have any topics or speakers you would be interested in me getting on this, let me know. Send me an email, shoot me a text, and I will do what I can to make that happen. So today we are going to have a poll. I don't do those very often, so we're going to have a poll. Your participation is greatly appreciated. Questions. So our speaker today, Brian, is coming off a little bit of a cold, and his voice was pretty much gone on Monday. I talked to him today. He sounds pretty good, but we don't know how long the voice is going to hold off. So today I will ask, please hold your questions to the end, or put them in the chat, and I will make sure at some point Brian addresses them and you get your answers. And then, as always, I will send out an email later this week or probably early next week with any resources from the webinar, including the PowerPoint, and I will put a recording up on our YouTube channel. So today's title, the Community Lifeline Status System. So after a disaster, the stabilization of community lifelines, such as transportation, communications, energy, and water systems, for example, is crucial to save lives and speed response and recovery efforts in an affected area. The new Community Lifeline Status System is a no-cost tool for states and local jurisdictions that can enhance situational awareness and provide a standardized, near real-time overview of Lifeline functionality. This presentation will provide a brief overview of FEMA's Community Lifelines construct and how the CLSS can be used to better support response and community recovery after a disaster. We are very lucky to have Brian Blake with us today. Brian Blake is the Executive Director of the Central United States Earthquake Consortium, CUSEC for short, which was established in 1983 under the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program. Brian's primary role is to lead and coordinate activities related to earthquake preparedness, planning, and mitigation within the CUSEC region. This involves working with local, state, and federal governments, as well as private sector and non-governmental partners, to create and implement programs which help communities prepare for, respond to, and mitigate the efforts of earthquakes. Brian has served at CUSEC since 2003 in various capacities, becoming executive director in 2023. He has led and supported numerous multi-year earthquake planning, resilience, and preparedness projects, including the New Madrid Seismic Zone Catastrophic Planning Initiative, the New Madrid Bicentennial, Capstone 14, and the Great Central U.S. Shakeout. Brian has a bachelor's degree from the University of Memphis and lives in the Memphis area with his family. Outside of work, Brian is an award-winning songwriter and performing musician. I have known Brian since my early days with KYEM, so I was so excited when we scheduled him to talk. So, Brian, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I am going to turn it over to you. Please say hello now that everybody can see you, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to this.
Hey, David, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, cool. Can you see the slides all right?
Yes, they just popped into view. We're good to go
Okay,
there.
sweet. Yeah, and thanks for the introduction and for the invitation to be here. I look forward to the questions. Yeah, and I've had this cold for the last several days, but I'm able to talk today, so that's great. But I'm gonna might be a little bit more brief than I originally intended, just so I don't go back and lose my voice again. Um, but Thanks again for having me. I am going to go off camera just for bandwidth purposes, and we'll just be on audio. Um, so, as mentioned, feel free to drop any questions in the chat as we go along, and then to the extent possible, I'll address any at the end. um, but for today's presentation, talk about several tools for disaster response and recovery, including the CLSS, as David mentioned, which is a project we've been working on for several years. But I'll also cover real briefly, since we are an earthquake focused group, I'll cover some earthquake hazard and risk issues that you all might want to be aware of there in Kentucky, as well as some resources that you can use for your own earthquake planning needs. So again, I'm Brian Blake with the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium. We are a nonprofit based in Memphis, Tennessee. You see there in our logo the states that we primarily serve. We're part of a larger program called the National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program that was established by Congress back in 1977. And that program is really consists of 4 federal agencies and dozens upon dozens of other nonprofits, engineering associations, universities, and research institutes that are all focused on earthquake resilience on a national scale. And the federal agencies that have kind of governance over the NEHRP program and oversight are the U.S. Geological Survey, National Institute for Standards and Technology, the National Science Foundation, and FEMA. And FEMA is primarily what we would think of as the implementer of the NEHRP program and all of the various research and lessons learned and things like that. And we fall under that FEMA umbrella, so to speak. Our very close partners at CUSEC are the state emergency management agencies. They're our closest partners. In fact, our board of directors are comprised of the state emergency management directors for each of our member states, plus South Carolina. So the state director for Kentucky EM is Eric Gibson, and he is on our board of directors. And we were established back in 1983 really to address earthquake risks as they became known essentially around the New Madrid seismic zone, which would certainly affect parts of Western Kentucky the most. And we do a lot in the education, mitigation, planning, information sharing, multi-state coordination realm, all around these earthquake hazards. And there are several seismic zones in our region that might affect Kentucky. And that includes, of course, the New Madrid seismic zone. Most people have heard of that. That's the zone that had very large earthquakes in the early 1800s. And then, but also just in southern Illinois and southwestern Indiana is the Wabash Valley seismic zone that could affect and has affected Kentucky in the past. There was an earthquake there in 2008 in Mount Carmel, Illinois, that actually did damage in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was that earthquake was felt over at least 16 states. And then you've got the East Tennessee seismic zone, which runs along kind of the area where the Appalachian Mountains are, and that zone begins roughly in northeast Alabama into northwest Georgia, across eastern Tennessee, and into somewhat into eastern Kentucky. And any one of these seismic zones is capable of producing a damaging earthquake essentially at any time. And so that's the key information there. Damaging earthquakes or large earthquakes have happened in these zones in the past. Smaller earthquakes continue to happen all the time. Our region in the central and eastern U.S. is geologically different than California. in other areas of seismicity like Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Hawaii, and so forth. And the reason for that is our faults, generally speaking, are buried deep below the surface, and there are also layers of sediment and other geologic material that causes the earthquake waves to be felt over a much wider area. Shown on this map are two examples of two earthquakes. On the left, on the west coast, the 1994 Northridge earthquake that was a magnitude 6.7. That was that's been our most impactful and disastrous earthquake since that time. It was the Northridge earthquake. On the right, in the central U.S. and the eastern U.S., you've got an example of an earthquake from 1895 that happened near Charleston, Missouri. You can see that the area of shaking in that kind of yellow area and the area of damage in the red is much wider than and much larger than in California. And again, that's due to our geology. So you may hear, and you may even feel of a moderate sized earthquake in our region that's felt over a very wide area. Whereas out in California or Oregon or Washington, they're not felt over a very wide area. You can walk on the San Andreas Fault. Here in our region, the New Madrid is buried thousands and thousands of feet below the surface, and in some parts of the faults, several miles below. So we have a different kind of geology here, is the main point. And as I mentioned, we're having earthquakes all the time in our area. This is over the last roughly 18 months or so. We've had almost 1,200 earthquakes over a magnitude 1.5. And you can kind of see the New Madrid and East Tennessee seismic zones on the map. The Wabash Valley zone has been not as active over the last few years. Our largest earthquake in recent times was last November. There was a magnitude 3.7 in the Boot Heel of Missouri, not too far from New Madrid, and northeast Arkansas and western Tennessee. And that earthquake was felt over a large area too. And again, it was a relatively small earthquake in terms of magnitude, but smaller magnitude earthquakes are felt over a wider area here in our region. So these earthquakes are ongoing all the time. Any one of the seismic zones are capable of producing a magnitude 6 or greater earthquake at any time. There's roughly a 40% chance that a magnitude 6 or greater earthquake could happen with essentially at any time, but within the next 50 years. So that's a pretty decent probability of what could be a very damaging earthquake, depending on where it occurs. So I want to make sure everybody knows how to protect themselves during an earthquake. And the reason for this is in our area, especially where we may not see these catastrophic earthquakes, and we have, generally speaking, a better built environment than in some other less developed nations. You're more likely to be injured from an earthquake by things falling from above or around you than you are from a building collapsing on you. So it's important to know how to protect yourself. And we have adapted this method that's recommended by FEMA, the Red Cross, California Earthquake Country Alliance, and many others. That's called drop, cover, and hold on. So if you feel an earthquake, the first thing you want to do is drop where you are or make yourself as low as possible, as low a target as possible. We always tell people, if you can't get back up, if you get down because there's an earthquake, if you drop and you can't get back up, don't get down in the first place. Just make yourself as low as possible. You want to cover your head and your neck with one arm, and if possible, seek shelter like under a table or something like that. And then you want to hold on to your position and to your shelter until the shaking stops. You don't want to evacuate a building until the shaking has stopped and it's apparently safe to do so. During an earthquake, you don't want to run into a building either. Um, People are often injured and sometimes killed by falling debris and bricks and things like that as they're trying to either go into a building or run out of one. And also during large and strong shaking, you may not be able to move very easily. So we promote this drop, cover, hold on method as a way for people to stay safe during earthquakes. And we have a lot of you I know have probably heard of the Great Shakeout Earthquake Drill. This is an annual event where we encourage people to practice drop, cover, hold on, and other aspects of their emergency plans, like communications plans or securing items in their homes, offices, businesses, etc. And every year, the shakeout takes place on the third Thursday in October. This year, that's October 16th. There's already more than 275,000 people registered to participate in Kentucky as of today. And we have this website, shakeout.org, where you can get all sorts of information, messaging, materials, resources, etc., on how to stay safe during an earthquake, but also how to conduct your earthquake drill along with literally millions of people in around the nation and around the world. So I encourage you all to check that out. It's a really valuable resource. Even if you don't necessarily live in the New Madrid or the Wabash or the East Tennessee seismic zone, you are one day going to be somewhere where there may be earthquakes. So it's important to do these kind of activities. And we encourage you to share this with people and other organizations in your communities across the state as well. I want to point out some resources from the U.S. Geological Survey. This is the federal agency that is primarily responsible for all of the monitoring of earthquakes in the U.S. There are other groups that monitor for earthquakes. University of Kentucky and the Geological Survey monitors for earthquakes. University of Memphis does as well. But those systems generally feed into the USGS National Seismic System. And from the USGS, you can get real-time notifications and feeds about earthquakes that are occurring, not only in Kentucky, but anywhere in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. as well. And you can sign up for text message alerts if there's a large earthquake in the region. Obviously, your first sign that there's a large earthquake is you're going to feel the shaking. But if you're interested in knowing when earthquakes are happening outside of Kentucky, you could sign up for a notification service through them. And they also have a lot of historical information or resources about various earthquake events. So if there was a large earthquake, USGS maintains event pages for all of those earthquakes. So here's an example of that. And for you PIOs and communications professionals, a few things I want to point out about this page is for every earthquake, USGS has an event page. Some important things for you to know about the resources on this page are basically you go to the USGS website, you'll see information about the earthquake. You click on that, you go to the event page. A few things on here to point out are the Did You Feel It tool, which means that you can go in and input what you felt and where you were during the earthquake, if there was any damage or injuries or things like that. It's kind of a citizen science tool, and it helps the USGS and seismologists understand the effects and the various wide-ranging implications of earthquakes when individuals fill this information out. So you can fill it out yourself, but you can also share it on social media and encourage your communities to fill out that info as well. Then there is the pager alert. That's the prompt assessment of global earthquake response. And that pager, you can click on the pager and it will bring up another page where it shows you the estimated economic losses and estimated injuries and fatalities for the earthquake. It gives you kind of a snapshot of a summary of what the expected impacts are. Then there's the aftershock forecast, which this is a newer feature, but it tells you how likely aftershocks are to occur within the next week or so after the earthquake. And then there's a section towards the bottom of the page that says whether or not the earthquake is part of a sequence of events, like if this was maybe a foreshock or a main shock or an aftershock of another event. And it gives you links to all of that, so you can kind of dive into that data, and you can use that if there's an earthquake that affects Kentucky. You can use all of these resources in your messaging and your communication. CUSEC, our organization, we have lots of resources on earthquakes on our website as well, including various hazard maps, liquefaction maps, tools and templates and scenarios, and all sorts of publications that you can download and access for no charge. Within Kentucky, you do have some resources there for earthquake as well. Steve Brewicki, a lot of you may know him. He's Brew. He's KYM's operations and planning chief, but he's also the state earthquake program manager. So he's the one responsible for all the planning over if there was an earthquake, what KYM, how they would respond and recover from that. Then the Kentucky Geological Survey at the University of Kentucky, Seth Carpenter is one of the lead geologists over geohazards. And he does presentations and briefs all of the time. And they have a lot of good materials and resources on the UK and KGS website for the Geological Survey as well. So you've got some Kentucky specific information there if you're interested in that. So what if an earthquake struck today? Here's a scenario event. It's a magnitude 7.1 earthquake near the Kentucky-Tennessee border. This is a scenario based on a New Madrid seismic zone event that would affect a large portion of western Kentucky. And an earthquake of this magnitude, you would see very strong to severe shaking there in Kentucky, if not in some areas violent shaking. You would also have moderate to heavy damage in some areas. An estimated 750,000 people would feel that earthquake in Kentucky at least. And then you could also have tens of thousands of people without power and essential services. You could have casualties and fatalities and impacts to utilities, transportation, and housing. All of those could be significantly impacted. So if that struck today, how would you communicate those impacts across your communities that you're serving? And I think we've got a poll now, David. I'll let you pull that up. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do that or you.
Nope, I got you, Brian.
Okay.
All righty, so I am going to launch it now. Can everybody see this? If you can, please enter your answer. There we go. We're getting some responses here.
Yep, I can see that too, David. Yeah.
That's a little over half. We're getting close to 3/4 of our audience. We'll give them just another 15 seconds if they want to respond. All righty. Let's call that good. Now I'm pretty new to this poll thing. I don't do them very often. Can you see the results,
Yeah, it looks like
Brian?
about half have never heard
Says
of them, half have heard of them but not used them.
There you go. Excellent. I have 5 out of 11 say they've never heard of them. 6 out of 11 say they've heard of them, but they've never used them. So thank you everyone to answering. I'm going to end the poll. There are your results.
Nicely done, David. There's no technological thing that you cannot overcome. I mean, just
Hey, gotta like it. All righty.
all
Back to
right.
you, sir.
So, so the way that you could communicate those lifelines, or that information, are through community lifelines. And the lifelines is a construct developed by FEMA, and a concept developed by FEMA roughly around the time around 2018 and 19, after Hurricane Maria, essentially. Um, and the lifelines enable continuous operation of critical functions that are essential to human health and safety and or economic security. And so the stabilization of lifelines after disaster is critically important. And we'll go into what are the various lifelines, and how they can be used during a disaster, and how you could also think about them when you're communicating about disasters that may happen in your communities. So the lifelines, they represent the very critical services, right, for communities to function, for life, safety, and general community sustainability. And they give a common language and kind of an easy to use and understand and digest language for government and various community stakeholders and partners, as well as elected officials like your mayors and your commissioners and your governors, and all the way up. So they can be used in this common framework. And they really look at the lifelines construct, looks at how to focus the response efforts on stabilizing the most essential services for a community after disaster. And this supports data driven and faster decision making for not only response, but also for the initial recovery after disaster. And then supports the lifelines can support resource allocation and what things are needed to respond and recover. And so lifelines, there are 8 of them, and they're shown down there on the bottom. And these are communications, health and medical, energy, which is power and fuel, food, hydration and sheltering, transportation, safety and security, water systems, and hazardous materials. And within the lifeline construct, these are not only something you would use during the disaster, but you could plan around these lifelines prior to an incident like an earthquake or a major flood or tornado. So you can develop plans and targeted indicators around how you would stabilize any one of these particular lifelines should you have the event. And then during the response, you can use the lifelines to say, okay, communications are down in this area. What do we need to do to restore those communications? And it goes hand in hand with pre-existing emergency response and emergency operations activities. So this is another way, though, to display and provide status updates on where the various lifelines are impacted and where the support is needed to stabilize those lifelines. Because that's the goal, is to stabilize the lifelines, and then you can get towards community recovery. So within the 8 community lifelines, there are components, and we'll just look at safety and security as an example there. So under safety and security, the components of that lifeline are law enforcement, fire service, search and rescue, government service, and community safety. So each one of these components are crucial to stabilizing overall a safety and security lifeline in itself. So if any one of these areas is impacted after a disaster, for instance, an earthquake, if you have raging fires and several fire stations in a community where the fires are occurring have been devastated by the earthquake, your fire services component of the safety and security lifeline would be impacted, and you would need to address that. And then you've also got, other components such as under energy, power, and fuel. Those are very basic, and several of the other lifelines have a couple, two or three of those components, while others have more, depending on what they are. Then your lifelines can have subcomponents. And so these are all within law enforcement, for instance, under the safety and security lifeline. You have subcomponents of police stations, actual law enforcement, physical security, and correctional facilities. And your government services component of safety and security, you got your EOC, various essential government functions and offices, schools, public records, and other aspects as well. So you've got your lifeline, your component, and then your subcomponent. And within this lifeline framework, it helps you address the component itself, right? The lifeline and the various subcomponents, and the use and application of FEMA's lifelines construct helps you identify what, so what, now what, where are the gaps, right, to be to become stable, and then what is the timeline for stabilization. So as an example of this, for transportation lifeline, here's how this would look for mass transit, which is a subcomponent of the transportation lifeline. This, again, we're looking at the component is the what, the status is the what. So the bus service is unavailable due to road debris. So what? 100,000 survivors have no access to transportation or emergency support services. And then the actions are now what? And it says what's happening with that lifeline. So the local jurisdictions are prioritizing, Corps of Engineers are clearing debris, they're using microtransit, etc., getting out public information about these various routes and so forth. And then the limiting factors are that full service won't resume until these routes are cleared. And then the when, right, is when this lifeline subcomponent is going to be stabilized. And so this shows that it's estimated to resume within a week. And so during a large disaster, depending on the impacts to the various lifelines and subcomponents, you could have various levels of reports just like this that help quickly condense the what, so what, now what, and what are we going to do about it, and when is it going to happen. And within the lifelines, colors are used to indicate the various conditions of the lifelines, components, and subcomponents. So gray equals the status is unknown. Green means that there's minimal impact to that lifeline. Yellow is there's moderate impact, and red is a significant impact. And these conditions can and will change during a response, right? So the whole object is if a lifeline is gray, you want to know whether it's green, yellow, or red. And if a lifeline is anything but green, you want to then know, okay, what are we going to do about it? Because we want to get back to that baseline / green functionality level, which is pre-incident functionality. Green means that lifeline is stable. And so these colors are very useful. They're very, everybody can understand quickly at a glance through dashboards and things like that how these colors come into play for the various lifelines. Then you can also use all of this for backwards planning. So here's an example again on the transportation lifeline of a few different components for the transportation lifeline. So gray status, the bridge infrastructure is unable to be determined. Red status, that the community can't reach a roadway, and you cannot, or the roadway is unreachable to get resources and assistance in. A yellow example would be that emergency supplies have been identified in resource, but the transportation issues are restricting the delivery. So you're not back to pre-disaster conditions. A green example would be that the route is reestablished and the community's needs are met and that lifeline is stable. And again, you can have this for the various individual lifelines, but also their components and then within those subcomponents. So in any given disaster, the lifelines, may look very different. For instance, in an earthquake, you could have almost all of these impacted at one time. But in a severe weather event, you may only have a few impacted. Like during a tornado, your water systems, if the water distribution system and wastewater treatment has not been impacted, that could be green, in a severe weather event. So it's going to change. It's going to fluctuate depending on the disaster. And again, here's some, just kind of drill down examples of how that might look like for an individual lifeline and various subcomponents. And so enter the Community Lifelines Status System. And this is a project that was developed for the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate by G&H International, which is a technology development firm based out of Washington, I think Virginia. And also we supported this project to develop a no-cost tool for state, local, tribal, and territorial government organizations to have resources and have a system to implement the Community Lifelines construct. Because what we found was that there was no pre-existing solutions to really operationalize the lifelines that operated on a common framework that most any planners or emergency operations folks could pick up and use and run with, and then wanted to develop a standardization in the use of this, right, for that immediate response and then longer term recovery. And so with the support from DHS, we've built this no-cost tool that integrates with existing technology that most EMAs and local governments already have, and that is the Esri ArcGIS software. So the CLSS is what we call it. It basically provides a way to capture those piece of information around each of the individual lifelines and the various subcomponents to answer those what, so what, now what, and what are we going to do about it questions that the lifelines are based around. And all of this CLSS tool is designed to simplify and provide a common framework for understanding the impacts of the disaster at hand, and it addresses hazards with a repeatable framework, because there are things like templates that can be built into this that you can use time and again during a disaster, and it complements and benefits and integrates into existing EOC Emergency Operations Center functionality. CLSS was developed with over 300 direct contacts and conversations with emergency managers across the nation. And we held numerous workshops to develop the features within it and build out a very robust roadmap. And the tool was tested for a year. Right now, it's in its final stage. It's deployable right now, and it can be used tomorrow if it gets installed. And we've also tested this not only in real world disasters, but also in exercises and things. We've taken those lessons learned from that to improve the tool. So basically, the CLSS is a web-based, a browser-based tool that you can use to update and qualify the impacts of these various lifelines. You can integrate data sets that you already own into existing dashboards and systems, as well as with other tools like WebEOC. I know Kentucky's going to a system called Kermit. The CLSS is designed to be integrated into other tools, and you can share the information about your lifelines with other organizations, partners, and stakeholders. You can develop reports that can be used for printing to PDF or attached to WebEOC, SIT-reps, senior leadership briefs, and so forth. There are various dashboards that you can access as well within the tool. And what happens with CLSS is that you're able to go in to the tool, and based on indicators that you have already set up prior to a disaster, what are the most important things to you? But you can assign impacts to these various lifelines and the components, and it uses a weighted ranking system that you are able to develop and kind of steer the bus on, so that you can set whether or not, in this case, on the power grid, it shows that the distribution systems have a significant impact. The generation systems are moderately impacted, and the transmission systems are not impacted. And you can see down there in the lower left, where you see the gauge, the tachometer, that in general, based on these weightings, that the power lifeline has a yellow status, which means it is impacted. So you can have various, again, those were examples of the components, but then you can have subcomponent indicators as well. So that's for things like on the fuel, under the power and fuel energy lifeline, you've got fuel is your component, your subcomponent, and then you've got, fuel's the component, and then you've got your subcomponent of fuel reserve status. You can assign, and fuel storage is an example here. And you can assign those indicators what their impact is. And then again, that gives you a weighted overall impact that you can then use to communicate the status of this lifeline. And you can do this across the board within CLSS, out of the box, for all of the various lifelines, components, and subcomponents. There's a data library feature where you can import information into the CLSS, and you can assign those data points, whether it's infrastructure, buildings, bridges, systems, etc. You can assign those to various lifelines, and you can even assign weights and rankings and impact status to those individual components as well. And that can help you drive your overall lifeline impacts. There are various templates. There's a baseline template that helps you get started, but then you can add and remove and edit various indicators that help you, again, qualify and quantify the impacts within the lifeline construct. You can create your own templates. You don't have to only use what comes with the tool. You can create your own templates, indicators, everything like that to reflect your own operational priorities and planning and various other needs. And as mentioned, you can link those live data sets. Some cool features of the CLSS that are useful, again, various dashboards that you can use to share these lifelines at a glance. This can be shared all the way from the local to the state to the federal level, so that if there's a very large incident, you can those decision makers can get easy to understand and digest information on what are the things, what are the needs, what are the things that are most impacted around the disaster, how do we get back to baseline and stabilized. So all this can be easily shared, again, with local executives and elected officials, from every level of government, from the local level all the way to the federal level. You can also share your lifeline status with surrounding communities, with surrounding states, et cetera, so that in the event of, a major event like a New Madrid earthquake, you can share that data so that others can understand what's happening in your state or your county or your community as well, across the various lifelines. And this works, this data integration works with any of those tools that already has an Esri integration / API, and you can share the dashboard statuses, etc. So it's a really powerful tool, and quite comprehensive. And it was a 3-year project to develop this. It is available to test drive and/or deploy today. What I would do, David, if you could put that link in the chat, is there's a problem, unfortunately, with the form to get you access to the CLSS, but you could bookmark this and go back to it if you'd like to test drive it or to deploy it in one of your communities. You're welcome to do that. You could also go on, email us, or go onto our website and click on there to fill out the form at a later time. We want to make sure that form is working because it'll give you the details that you need to test drive and deploy it. We had something break, so need to go in and fix that.
Hey, Brian.
Yep.
I will also send out a copy of this PowerPoint, the PDF,
Okay, cool.
so those links will be clickable there,
Okay.
and I'll make sure they're in the body of the email as well. So we'll make sure people get them.
Cool. And this has been deployed, by the way, to a number of states around the country. Several dozen counties are already using it. Some universities are using it as well, and then various government organizations too. So this is actively being used and adopted, and it's something that you own. Should point that out. This is not something that's hosted. It's owned by your agency, and you own the data, and it's yours. Here's some links to some various Lifeline resources. FEMA has developed a whole implementation toolkit around Lifelines, as well as an independent study course to learn more about it. It's a short 2 or 3 hour course. And then we've got on what's called our hub site, we've got all of the resources that you would need to deploy the CLSS. We've got tutorials, videos, documentation, FAQs, and that sort of thing is on our hub site. So there's my contact information. CUSEC also has a newsletter. You're welcome to sign up for that if you'd like to get more information about earthquakes, new tools, resources, products, etc. And we send out roughly a quarterly newsletter that you would get updates on. We don't spam you too much. So with that, I think that's my last slide, David. I'll leave that up for just a second, and I can go through the chat real quick. My voice is feeling okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, we need the Waffle House Index as a lifeline. You're right.
Do you see the question from John Bobel there at the bottom?
Yeah.
If not, I can read it to you.
No, I can't see it. Yeah. So he didn't see where flooding would be listed as a factor, as well as stormwater systems, status of rivers, streams, and flows, and flood stages, and so forth. And um, so the lifelines and the CLSS are more of what are the impacts based on the flooding, right? But those various infrastructure components, the status of the rivers and stream flows and flood stages and so forth, are not lifelines themselves, but they could impact one or more of the lifelines or subcomponents, et cetera. Um, so that, just kind of keep that in mind, that this is a tool not to necessarily qualify what's happening on the ground in terms of the disaster itself, right? Like the earthquake magnitude or the flood or the tornado and things like that. But it's more what's the impact to those various critical functions needed for community stabilization.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Yeah, just kind of adding on that as a PIO, I see it as identifying the things that affect your community. So if you use these lifelines, it'll help you paint the full story of how the public is affected. And then as a PIO and as a group with your leadership, you can determine what to tell the people to do because of what's going on. So, for example, your bus lines are, heavily impacted and not running. So you can tell people, if you don't need to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. And if you have to go somewhere and have a disability that you can't do somewhere else, then you can contact somebody like the local emergency manager for the support and what you need to do. That's the way I look at those. So
Yeah.
it makes sure that nothing is left missed. So I love that.
Yeah, and you don't have to use the CLSS to communicate those things because the concept is the same, but the CLSS tool helps you operationalize that into a system where you're kind of standardizing and saying this thing is red, green, or yellow because we've determined what goes into that. It's not just kind of arbitrary. And within the Community Lifelines toolkit that FEMA offers, they already have like those icons and things. So if you wanted to download the various icons, you could do that, and then use that in your own briefings if you wanted to, after a disaster. So it doesn't have to only be with the CLSS tool, but you could use that as another resource.
Excellent. Does anybody have any last questions for Brian? Brian, I'm going to share my screen so I can go through a couple of announcements. But if you have a question, you can put it into chat. You can unmute yourself real quickly and ask Brian yourself.
Yeah, and thanks everybody as well, and thanks David for having me here this week.
No, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. I'm so glad your voice came back to you so that you could do this with us.
Me too.
So, as everybody knows, here's my contact information. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas for future topics or speakers, please let me know. Upcoming schedule. I have scheduled through the end of the year. So we do have next month, we're going to have alerts, effective alerts and warnings. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. In November, we'll have a speaker talk about AI and social media. She's fantastic. I've attended one of her webinars before and she's great. December, we are going to take off December again for the holidays. So we'll kick it back off in January. I do already have somebody scheduled for January, so that's good. As I mentioned, next month we're going to have Jeanette Sutton. She's fantastic. She's created the Warn Room. She's known worldwide for her alerts and warnings. You'll learn about the social science theory behind effective alerts and warnings. You'll learn about how the warning response model applies to real world messaging. You'll learn strategies to improve message outcomes and motivate protective actions. You're going to learn about evidence based practices for public information officers in all hazard communication. I'm really looking forward to it. So I hope you can join us for that. Registration is up for that. Otherwise, I want to take one more time to thank Brian. Help me with a virtual round of applause for Brian. It was great. I appreciate it so much. I will put together a follow up email with the links that you've shared, and I will post a recording of this to YouTube, and then I will send out that notification later this week or early next week. Otherwise, thank you so much, Brian. Again, appreciate you being here. Thanks to the audience for showing up. Everybody have a great day and a great rest of your week, and we will see you next month.